I didn't really realize how bad it was until I was seeing heterosexual males with trans identities coming into the village and being really aggressive to lesbians, even in gay bars where there may be two or three lesbians in the whole room, because these would be the kinds of bars where there's like it's almost all guys, you know.
Yep.
And then this trans identifying male would come in and start harassing the two lesbians in the corner. And it's like, what the hell is going on? I got so mad, you know. These kinds of things really angered me. And I felt upset that I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I didn't know how to speak about it without stepping on toes.
That's
you know, even when I worked at a trans bar 25 years ago, you know, there was a lot of like caution around language because you didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But a lot of the transsexuals I knew would deliberately diffuse that with saucy humor. You know, lots of jokes, lots of cracking, self-deprecating humor, lots of that kind of thing. These were all male to female trans people. You know, there was just a lot of diffusing the tension and the anxiety with a lot of humor and camaraderie so that, you know, everybody could get along, even if we didn't entirely understand each other. And that sense of like diffusing things with humor and lightheartedness and forgiveness if someone missteps in their language or in their understanding has turned into a battleground. Now it's like, ah.
Hey, everybody. Oh, my God. I caught myself another one. This one's going to be great today. So I've been dying to get this guy on my show. So finally we connected and here we are. But of course, before we move on, I want to thank everybody for always joining me and really helping this channel grow and, you know, liking, subscribing, all of those things. It's really, I see the growth of my channel and I finally hit 40,000. So that's pretty awesome. And it's because of people like this coming on and also all the support you all are giving me out there and this crazy weirdo world that we are in today. So this afternoon I have Arty here, and so Arty, oh my God, I'm so super excited to chat with you. And so why don't you just tell the viewers first off a little bit about yourself?
Hi, it's so great to finally meet you, Buck. It should have happened sooner. It's been too long. I'm so excited to finally get to chat with you. My name's Arty Morty. That's not my real name. I live in Toronto, Canada. I'm in my mid 40s, and I guess my story is that I have been working in the gay village and the gay scene and very embedded in the gay community for a long time. And over the last few years, I started to getting really worried about changes, how it was going off the rails. People were becoming really extremist. Everybody was suddenly developing gender dysphoria. All sorts of people were showing up in the gay village that had never been around before. And it was alarming me. And it slowly made me realize that maybe remember all the things that I hadn't paid attention to about my own life. I had gender dysphoria as a kid. I was very feminine, very sort of typical gay boy life story, gravitated towards girl toys, liked very, very girly things, really wanted to be a girl. And that was the distress around that was exacerbated by the fact that I grew up in a really troubled home. We were very poor. I lived in a very rough neighborhood. There was a lot of homophobia and violence. So that exacerbated it. But I got over my dysphoria around the time that many people do in puberty. And then I was coping with my sexual identity, but my homosexuality. And that was very difficult for me. And again, living in a very violent neighborhood, I left home at a young age. And I was, like many young LGBT people, street involved to cope with the stress. But I put myself together. I got a job. I started working and living in the village, and I worked at a transsexual bar for a little while. So I was very familiar with, you know, with gender dysphoria. I was familiar with transsexuals to some degree from that experience. But by the year 2000, and by the time I became, you know, by the time I entered my 20s, I went off to university for a bit, and then I got into the working world, and I got into a long-term relationship, and I just kind of left all of that behind. So it's just in the last few years I came back to it. I was a bartender at a gay bar, and I was seeing things just erupting into craziness. I had a transsexual friend who very tragically died by suicide, and it was just everything was going crazy. And I started talking about it online. I started saying, I don't know what's going on. And I very quickly got canceled for it because I wasn't saying the right things, you know? So now I don't work at a gay bar anymore. I literally feel deeply uncomfortable. I live in the gay village, but I won't walk down the main strip, you know. I'll like slink through the alleys. I don't really slink through the alleys, but you know what I mean. I feel like I'm an outcast in the gay community that I was such a central part of for a while because I'm speaking the truth about what's going on, the mess we're in.
Wow. I mean, wow, you're really good at telling your story because like so much happened to you. And here we are, right? And also, I completely relate to you. I'm 60, so I completely relate to you on so many levels because I was part of that whole community as well. I was around it all. I mostly all my friends were gay men. Like, I always coexisted in the gay male world on some level, and then like you just said, and then all of a sudden you walked back in and you were like, what? And it's not our community anymore. It's something very absurd and actually to me very scary and not welcoming, and I don't feel a part of the community I've always felt a part of on some level. I don't think that we all hated each other like I feel like we do now on some level. Did you ever feel the intensity that's sort of coming at each other?
No, it's the strangest thing. I think it's
Yeah,
like as gay acceptance grows, instead
yeah.
of us learning to integrate and be more tolerant, we're almost feeling threatened by the fact that we're not oppressed anymore. So we're looking for oppression. We're almost fighting each other to be more oppressed. I don't know
Wow.
how to explain that. Does that make sense?
No, it
Like
makes
there's a sense that it's like, oh my goodness, all the banks are taking over the gay pride parades and the gay pride marches, and all the wealthy straight people are moving into the gay villages, and the gay bars are glitzier than ever.
yeah,
And now everybody's at war to be like, this is my oppression movement. This is my
that's
oppression
right.
movement.
That's
It's
right.
crazy, you know?
Well, it's sad because, I do come from the AIDS epidemic, and I lost a lot. I bring it up all the time because it's such an important thing we can never forget. And, we did come together as community on some level to help. I remember I was a gay woman at the time, and we really did fight for our brothers. And really, that whole thing was so scary. And I thought it really on some level solidified us, and it really made us a stronger community on some level. We all fought together to get to that next space, and then we started getting rights, and then we're all just living our lives all awesome, right? We could walk down the street holding hands and be married to each other. But I really think you hit it on the head when you said, I think it's an some people want to feel more oppressed than the other person. And that's why I do also think that we are inventing all these new identities, right?
Yeah.
It's the identity war that's really freaking me out because that has nothing to do with trans. I just don't agree. They can do whatever they want, right? I mean, I think we've always had this idea of identity, like queer nation and queers and,
Yeah.
queer fluid,
Mhm.
gender fluid, all of those things existed before non-binary. It's just renaming it. But I don't think we were ever so mean and homophobia. Let's just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's see. I think I didn't really realize how bad it was until I was seeing heterosexual males with trans identities coming into the village and being really aggressive to lesbians, even in gay bars where where there may be 2 or 3 lesbians in the whole room, because these would be the kinds of bars where there's like, it's almost all guys,
Yep.
And then this trans identifying male would come in and start harassing the 2 lesbians in the corner. And it's like, what the hell is going on? I got so mad, These kinds of
Wow.
things really angered me. And I felt upset that I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I didn't know how to speak about it without stepping on toes.
That's right.
Even when I worked at a trans bar 25 years ago, there was a lot of like caution around language because you didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But a lot of the transsexuals I knew would deliberately diffuse that with saucy humor, lots of jokes, lots of cracking, self-deprecating humor, lots of that kind of thing. These were all male to female trans people, there was just a lot of diffusing the tension and the anxiety with a lot of humor and camaraderie so that, everybody could get along, even if we didn't entirely understand each other. And that sense of like diffusing things with humor and lightheartedness and forgiveness if someone missteps in their language or in their understanding has turned into a battleground. Now it's like, you did something wrong. You misgendered accidentally, but there's no excuse kind of thing. And it's like, give me a break,
right.
But
I think you hit it on the head when you said a lot of straight men, right, trans identifying males a lot of them are straight guys now, it seems like. That's, I think, a huge part of the mess that we're in. They're demanding, this whole mess is very much coming from the trans woman space. That it's like guys like me are just in this weird space space.
Yeah, it's really difficult because I want to offer all the courtesies to in the world to people who experience gender dysphoria and who have
Yeah.
good intentions and
Yeah.
who are being good people. But we have to face the fact that there's a massive group of people who are not developing transgender identities because they're
That's right.
experiencing dysphoria and they're looking for relief. They're developing transgender identities
Yep.
because they're seeing opportunities.
Yep.
This isn't
Yep.
they're not trying to get away from distress. They're trying to get into euphoria. They're trying
God.
to take advantage of things. And we have to call this out. Like, I know that this can be stressful for people who have trans identities to face it, but we have to face it because it's destroying everything.
Oh my God.
We have to face,
100%, my friend. If me and you don't have these conversations, and it's up to us because this is our community, okay? I feel that me and you are totally brothers, and I believe that we are supposed to be in this together, right? And I do believe if me and you don't speak up together, and however you see me or whatever your situation, I know you have respect for me. I don't ever, and I've always had respect for my community. I don't ever feel like I was disrespected on it because I've always been honest about who and what I am. I mean, to me, being proud of my biology and being proud of the accomplishments I've made in my transition to look this way and to walk the world are a very important part of being a transsexual. And it's why I didn't get so much hate that I get now from my own transgender community. That's where I can tell you that this is all what you're saying is true, because these new trans identifying males mostly are the ones causing the rift and really coming into it with a different set of rules than what we had previously had, which is, people aren't going to accept us. That's okay. And if you're honest about who you are, you'll find the people who accept you. That's how we've always kind of navigated being transsexuals. It's like, I'm always honest. It is weird on some level that a woman becomes a man and I look like a dude. And that's kind of, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, so what? But I did it and we move forward. But the only way to get people, and it's the same with the gay place. People used to hate gays, right? But now people are just like, whatever, I don't care. Like, do your thing. That's because on some level, they're not scared of us anymore.
Yeah. Well, it really diffuses the situation when you talk about it like that. When you own what you are and you own who you are, people aren't feeling threatened. There's such a tension right now between, people who are critical of the gender identity ideology movement. I certainly am very strongly in that camp, and people who are feeling like they could lose things. But we have to be honest. The way through is as much tolerance as possible on all sides and honesty. You just have to be honest about the situation. Biological sex does not change. Whatever experience you're going through, people will tolerate you and will offer you all the people will want to support you as long as you're honest about your situation. I'm speaking to MTFs and FTMs, and anywhere you are, you have to make sure that you own your shit. kind of thing,
It's with anything on some level, right? If you're just denying stuff in your life, and it's like, okay, so let's just use my dental work. I was denying my gum disease for so long, and now I have no teeth because of it. And if I would have just been honest, something's wrong here. I'm just, you know what I mean? But I just kept putting it off. It really does come from a space of this idea that if you ignore it long enough, it'll go away. That's not true. So we've ignored, and I believe on some level, we put ourselves into this space because I think people were actually trying to be cool in the beginning and saying, okay, well, we're going to accept these trans people and and they don't necessarily agree, but I really do think people got duped on some level, and they were trying to sort of say, okay, let's help these people get through this. And I don't think they understood that these people are not really transsexual people. These are people invading our space, specifically the ones we were talking about, the ones who walk into lesbian bars and start harassing lesbians that they have to date them. Like that never happened in the trans community before.
I certainly wasn't seeing that, it's very different. And you can see even now that I can imagine, to be a transsexual, people will have their backs up if you're making demands, but if you're being reasonable, you can see how people will reach out and offer so much. And
That's
I
right.
mean, I can imagine that must be, I don't know what it's like to be a transsexual. I only know what it was
Yeah.
like to have dysphoria as a young person.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we just have to be a lot more realistic on that front. But there's some parallels with the gay rights movement because in the past, in the 1960s and 1970s, when when things were just taking off, there was a lot of that tension too, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of working that out. I always like to look at the parallels in the history of how the gay rights movement got to the place where it eventually just completely took off and
Yeah.
made great strides. And I'd like to see the same thing for people with gender dysphoria who have
That's
transsexual
right.
identities. So let's look at the parallels. One of them is that the gay rights movement was in denial about what was going on for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
Gay people called themselves, did you hear about this? The homophiles? Have you heard of this?
What?
They didn't want to call themselves homosexuals because they thought the word sexual would never win them acceptance in society. So they
Wow.
tried to bury any evidence that it was, that it involved sexuality by calling it love, homophilia, instead of homosexuality.
Oh.
And then they also
Wow.
tried to bury any evidence that it had anything to do with gender nonconformity. So the gay rights activists, this was long before they called themselves gay, they called
Right.
themselves homophiles, and you were only allowed to be in the group if you were a masculine gay man or a feminine gay woman. Butch dykes and sissy gays were absolutely excommunicated from this rights group. So anything to do with gender nonconformity, anything to do with sexuality, they had to cleanse it out, and they called it the homophile movement. And
Wow.
they meant well. They thought this was a good sort of
Sure.
political strategy to find legitimacy, to keep the sort of skeletons, sweep them under the closet until we get enough recognition, and then we'll bring out then we'll
Yep.
bring out the butch lesbians and the sissy gays, and then we'll start talking about sodomy and everything. But it didn't work that way. It didn't work at all that way. People could
Yeah,
see through
right.
it. People could sense there was a dishonesty. And after
That's
the Stonewall riots, there was a sense of like gays and lesbians were like, we're sick of this.
Mhm.
We're out. We're proud. We're here. We're gay. Yes, we're gender nonconforming. Yes, us lesbians are butch as hell and we don't give a shit. And us
Right.
gay guys, we can be as feminine as we want and we don't give a shit. And we have sex with each other and nothing is hurting anyone. Face it. Just rip off that Band-Aid and face it. And what happened was acceptance moved really quickly all of a sudden. And there are some serious lessons there, I think, for the transgender movement.
Okay.
Which is that we have to be honest about gender dysphoria. We have to be honest that it's in the DSM for a reason. We have to be honest about these are decisions. These are cosmetic procedures we're having that have risks attached to them. We have to be honest that we're not literally changing our biological sex. And once we're honest about these things, I think integration can happen in a reasonable way, a way of balancing rights, as long as we just have to face our own demons. And it's really important because another lesson from the gay rights movement is that people with their own motives snuck into that movement. There were pedophiles who saw that the gay rights movement was taking off and thought, oh, maybe I can sneak into that and say, oh, we want gay rights and also we should be able to sleep with children, kind of thing.
God.
And we had to face that. We had to face the bad people within the gay rights movement and push them out and address them. We were under so much pressure from the Christian right telling us we were all bad. We had a really hard time admitting that they had a point sometimes. We really struggled with that, but eventually we did. Eventually we had to say, okay, listen, Christian right, you are homophobic bigots. You're being mean to us. You're saying horrible things. You're saying we're all pervs and pedophiles and dangerous, and that's horrible. But we also had to say, but you know what? There are about 10% of the major activists in this movement actually are not what you are saying, and they have snuck in, and we have to kick them out. And we're seeing that in the trans movement. We're seeing some people, transsexuals, probably feel very frightened about the right wing pushing on them, but they have to recognize that some of the arguments being made, there's validity, and they have to face that and kick them out. It's a very difficult thing to do.
It is.
But the gay rights movement went through it as well.
So thank you for that. What you just said is such an important thing that I think people will start to understand why honesty, and that there's always creepy weirdos in every movement. There's always people trying to derail. There is. Or just, I mean, God, remember NAMBLA? NAMBLA was also like.
NAMBLA was a gay rights movement thing. It was in the gay rights movement. That NAMBLA is what we had to kick out.
That's right. So I remember.
The trans movement has to admit you got like fetishistic predators deliberately doing things.
And that's why they won't talk about AGP or any of the other levels of what all of that means, right? And so I'm going to tell you that we were moving along. I had no problem living in the world at all.
Yep.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Mhm.
That I
Canada
had
does
no
that.
problem against that thing. But you know what I mean? Like never. People were super because of my honesty. I always keep going back to that. My honesty. I've never denied my biology. It's part of my journey. It's the reason I'm here. And to deny it means what are you denying? So I look at it. So there's this new movement of denying our biology. Well, these are not real transsexual people. That's why I know they're doing it, because if they were real transsexual people, they would not deny their biology. They're trying to create something else, and they're trying to make it so anyone can be trans, right? Without any diagnosis, you just know you're trans. What? You don't just know you're trans, because trans isn't even a thing. Like, I never said I was trans. I said I feel like a dude, right? Gender dysphoria. I feel like a
Yeah.
dude. Like, so that's when I see this language being handed to the younger generation. I'm trans. I go, but what does that even mean to be?
Yeah, they're talking like it's a spiritual thing. I'm discovering my inner transnicity. Like I have
That's
this
right.
essence of trans. I am a trans. It's like, no, you can adopt a transsexual identity. You can undergo transsexual procedures.
That's
You
right.
know, you
That's
can do
right.
these things, but these are actions. You know, these are not essences. These are
That's
not.
right.
There's no like platonic ideal of a trans person. There's no like.
No.
You know, like it's just a thing. Like it's a thing that I think is it's important that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater when we're criticizing the missteps of this movement, to put it mildly.
Yes.
But there are people who experience severe dysphoria for whom,
right.
obviously, you know, these procedures and this identity tremendously helps them move through the world and gives them, you know, everything they need to get on with life. But on the other hand, there are some people who are bad actors who are trying to push children into believing it's this different thing. And it's really, really scary.
God,
what's happening to children is the central. I mean, what's happening to women's rights is horrifying. You know, these fetishists who are just taking advantage of everybody's goodwill to get away with things they really shouldn't, when what they really need to do is get their urges under control. You know,
that's right.
Yeah, totally. They have to get their urges under control. But what's happening to children is so scary. Yeah, it's so scary.
It's more
the most powerful voices to stop it are people who are transsexual, who've experienced gender dysphoria and gone through procedures. Those are the absolute 100%. You know, a transsexual voice speaking out against pediatric transition is worth a million everyone else's. You know,
seriously. You're right. It's why we all had to step up. Me and, you know, Blair White's been doing it a long time. This kid Marcus, official tranny, like me, all of us. I'm like, what? Wait a minute here. Never in the history. Remember how long I transitioned? I transitioned 30 years ago. So I do have a lot of experience in this situation. They can't deny that. That's why they don't like me, right? That's why the trans activists, because I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. You all talk about lived experience. I'm probably one of the oldest trannies on the block here, and you're telling me.
And you lived it very publicly. I want to say for a second, you know, that porno for pyros video like changed my life.
Oh my God, awesome.
I live in Canada too, where I think it was a more explicit version of the video, was edited differently. And that video was in heavy, heavy rotation on Much Music, which is the Canadian version of MTV, which is way
That's
cooler.
right. I remember I was on Much Music.
Totally. Really?
Yeah, I did interviews with them. I did all of this kind of stuff with Much Music.
I didn't know all that, but that was
totally
life changing for me. It really, you know, like
cool.
My experience being street involved, and I don't like to use the word queer personally, but you know, a gay person, that really spoke to me.
Wow, I know it was really ahead of its time. That director here in America, they actually banned it on MTV because it was too explicit, which is quite hilarious. Today, that would be like a cakewalk or so. You know what I mean?
Ban it again now because you're called cursed female, and you're not allowed to call yourself a female anymore.
That's right. It's so good, man. So wow, that's so cool that you know that video. So yeah, I have been. That was even before my transition, right? So I have been sort of out there and outspoken as a big butch dyke, and you know, I've always been sort of proud of who I am and my journeys of how I got here. But now, you know, somebody like me gets shut down by a supposedly loving and embracing trans community is why I have to expose it, because it's not true. They're not in any way, shape, or form diverse, inclusive, all of the things they keep saying they are. But the number one thing for me was the kids. That was when I was like, hold up. We've never transitioned kids before, Arty. We never talked about it. It was never something that we sort of had an idea about, none of it. So all of a sudden, boom, trans kids exist. No, they don't. They actually don't.
Drive that is being driven by people who don't want to face reality, who want to reconceptualize their transness as an innate, unchanging essence that they discovered within themselves, because a lot of people don't want to face the fact that gender nonconformity is as real as pie. That's been around for all time. Extreme gender nonconformity has been around for all time. Gender stereotypes, they're not really ever going to go away. We can try to make the world more tolerant, but because human sex drive makes manliness attractive to females and feminineness attractive to males, and vice versa for homosexuals, we're always going to use these sex signals and sex stereotypes as a way to make meaning in our lives, no matter what.
The nonconformity, I think, is a very important part of this conversation. We are now knocking out this idea of you have to be a man. So also, that's very homophobic. Don't you find it to be very homophobic to transition children? Like what?
To the core of my being, the idea that they're categorizing femininity in boys and masculinity in girls as transness is saying, and sometimes you see it directly. I got into a discussion with a homosexual transsexual male. There's a trans woman who is male and admitted openly, to my delight, that yes, I am a homosexual male biologically, and I have transitioned to live as a woman for XYZ reasons. And I promoted this person's video as great. Great. And this person went to my channel and started assailing me in the comments for some reason, when all I did was say, this is great, and I got into an argument with a couple of homosexuals who were saying, yes, I am homosexual, but I would never want to live the gay lifestyle because they're disgusting. And I would rather a child be transitioned than ever be gay, was what they were saying. And it was like, they're openly saying, this group of people is openly saying, yes, I admit that I did this because I know that biologically I'm a gay male, but I would never want to be one because I hate it. And I want less gay males in the world. I want them all to live the better life as a trans woman. And I was just like, I can't believe you would say this. But that's surely not, I don't think that extreme a viewpoint is probably not common among trans women, but there's a kernel of that I see more often than I should,
It's becoming more common. So one person starts saying it, the next, but that's actually really profound what you said. And I'm so happy that you put that out here in the universe, because now people are going to hear that. I've been saying it all along. I think a lot of people have I hate using this word, but I'm going to have to for this, internalized homophobia, right? I do think on some level that's why they want to transition kids, because even parents might not want to have a gay kid. Maybe they'd rather have a boy or a girl, right? And not necessarily a gay or a trans kid. The way they celebrate their trans kids is creepy. It's absurd. And like, you can't put your kid all over the internet like that, because what if the kid changes their mind in 10 or 5 years?
Yeah, I think we should look at that a bit more. The idea that a parent would rather have a trans kid than a gay kid. I think a lot of people look at that sentence and think it just doesn't sound plausible. Forget it. That's ridiculous. So we have to really look at it for a minute and go like, is it possible that there are parents who would rather have a trans kid than a gay kid? And why and how? And I think the why and how of it is they're not thinking of having a trans kid. They're thinking of having a kid who's just the other sex. Once you start saying trans isn't a thing anymore, that it's just the other sex, then you don't have a thing, And that's why they're trying to give them puberty blockers. That's why they're trying to give them all these surgeries as early as possible. The idea is they don't want a trans kid or a gay kid. They want the gender nonconformity to go away altogether. And they've been sold a lie that their gender nonconforming child will neither live as a minority in the trans community or as a minority in the gay community, that their child is just going to integrate into the world magically. And that's a very appealing thing, I think, for a lot of transsexuals too, who don't necessarily pass and who are always going to be sort of seen as gender outliers, even though they're transsexual,
That's right. That's a great way to put it. I appreciate that. But I'm going to tell you from my own experience, you know, so I grew up very masculine girl, and I was a tomboy. I was all of those things, right? And I could always feel my dad had a little bit of an issue with it. My parents were cool. Mostly my mom was more cool about it than my dad. But that, you know, my sisters were all kind of masculine girls, and my dad raised us that way. But that being said, I was much more masculine, and I really wanted to be a boy, and blah 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 blah. Grew up, became a girl. My sisters are very masculine women. But when I became like a hardcore les dude with a shaved head, like you saw in that video, my dad was mortified. Stay away. We don't want the neighbors to see you, like all of that stuff. And when I transitioned, my dad actually said to me, it's easier for me to introduce you as my son than my gay daughter. Those words came out of his mouth. So I have this experience. And, you know, today my dad, I don't think he's that way anymore. This was such a long time ago. But, you know, I actually have that experience with my dad had a hard time with me being a butch woman. And now I'm his son. And it's really easy for him to not have to explain who I am on some level. So I do think parents struggle with that. And you're right. They don't want a gender non-conforming son or daughter. And I think that trans is this way to sort of, and then also gay people still, there's a lot of homophobia in the world. I don't think people understand. It's not, I mean, I live in California. You live in Toronto. It's super easy for us, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But what about other places like Idaho and all those? I think kids struggle in those spaces more than we do.
And let's not forget, homosexuality is a sexuality. Sex is in there. If people are not comfortable, my child is going to be doing sodomy if it's a male or whatever. I don't like this, you know?
Yep.
And trans is an identity. So there's, again, it goes back to that when gays tried to whitewash homosexuality as just an identity and had nothing to do with sexuality.
Right.
There's kind of this idea that transgender has nothing to do with sexuality. It's just it's you're in the LGBT, but you're not sexual. It's a non-sexual thing. And that can be appealing. And I think that's a big factor with ROGD and these teen girls who are so terrified of, rightly, I have so much sympathy for the young boys and girls who are so confused about the world. They're growing up in just, the world is crazy right now. Social media, it has screwed everything up. We were not ready for it. We were not ready for it. You know, like it screwed up everything in 1,000 ways. But one of them is that we're just bombarded by these images of ideal male and female forms. And both young boys and young girls are being scared that this is like a class they're going to fail. You know, I have to turn into a Kardashian or I have to turn into a whatever the male equivalent is. I think I don't want to take this class. I don't think I'm going to get it. You know, I want to drop out of that class. And I think that's what a lot of this non-binary is like, I don't want to have to try to feminize myself to this ridiculous point if I'm a girl, or I don't want to have to try to masculinize myself. Before social media, people didn't feel that much pressure to gender stereotype themselves at all. If you lived in a little town with like 5,000 people, you know, there was X number of girls you would compare yourself against, and you didn't have to be a fucking Kardashian. You could just look, you know, you could look like a perfectly good 6 and you'd be fine. You know, you don't have to try to be a 10 as a girl. You're fine, you know, and you're going to find love and happiness. And boys, the same thing. You don't have to turn yourself into some goddamn Adonis because you're looking at the global media all day long. You're just in your village and you're going to find happiness just looking like a normal human being. And you don't have to be such an extreme. And they got through it, you know.
That's right.
Now we're just constantly comparing ourselves to this global, the most beautiful men in the world, and the 7 billion people in the world are being put right into our phones all day long. The most beautiful women in the world are being put right into our phones all day long. We're not just trying to fit into the little community that's in our immediate physical environment. We're trying to fit ourselves into the whole world and perfect ourselves. That's just so scary. You're seeing so many young people just opting out of the whole thing. And they think that to be a man and to be a woman is to be a part of that. So I blame social media more than anything else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, me too. And I see it more. Oh my God. I'm so saddened by how these kids are, and they're mean and they're the kids are disconnected on so many levels. They're so angry and I'm like, if you're trans, I always tell the kids, I'm like, why are you so angry? You should be happy that you have this opportunity to just go and do what you need to do. That's why I'm saying, are you really trans or something else going on with you, kiddo? Because there's no way you should be so angry at the world. The world doesn't hate you. How do you think I navigated the world for 30 years? If they hated us, I would not be here. And then they can't have the conversation because I'm messing up their whole sort of, narrative. And so I 100% I'm on board with you. And ROGD, it's all from social media. Girls are trying to, kind of do what you're saying right there. And they don't want to have to go to these standards of what it means to be a woman or a man. I mean, the gay community has always been that way. The gay male community about body.
Yeah, it's pretty
bodies.
Like I have body dysmorphia sometimes.
Sure.
I the irony. I speak out against medicalizing young people's bodies, but I take testosterone.
Yeah, that's different. That's different. I think bio men start to get to a certain age. You should be on testosterone. I think it's very healthy for you, to be honest.
It certainly increases the vitality, but then you go off it, and then it's like, oh, can't
crash
for 6 months.
No, I know. I've been on it for 30 years, which is a hell of a long time to be on a substance. That's why, I have a lot of experience. It's not good, and it's not just good. I have horrible experiences in this situation, but I would not change it for the world. I wouldn't. I'm willing to take on the bad with the good, but I don't think the young people are being sort of told the bad. They're only being told it's trans joy or euphoria or cut your boobs off and you'll be completely okay. And now what's happening is what we both know, detransitioners.
Yeah. And for these young people, I think it's really important that we not just criticize this situation, but we offer another way out. So these young people who are in this terrible crisis and they're running to ROGD, we can't just say they're making mistakes. Look at those idiots. These are children. We need to offer them solutions. And we need to make sure these are full solutions. We need to make sure we are not othering or vilifying the situation. We have to take it on, and we have to make sure that these people get the support that they need. And we have to really empathize with these kids who are experiencing these feelings so that we can understand where our responsibility is and how did we get them to feel those feelings. Never blame a child for feeling a feeling. Never blame a child for feeling a feeling.
No,
if a child is feeling a feeling, society is to blame.
That's right. That's so great. Thank you for saying that. We are all part of
society. We need to fix what's going on with these kids. We need to offer them solutions. And that means we really need to be addressing the social media crisis with young people. Let's not just blame trans activism. Let's blame the systemic issues with social media affecting people's body images and affecting gender stereotypes.
That's right. What's really going on there is what you're saying. And you're right. We're not actually looking at what's really going on here. Come on, kids have always had. I struggled in the 60s, right? We all struggle. You struggled on some level. And that's not a bad thing. But you're right. Why are we not addressing that? And why are we just sort of saying, well, here, do this? No, we're not even giving them other options. We're just kind of saying, trans kids are trans kids, and that's it. And then when they decide they're not trans, the whole community comes after them. And then they get vilified again for detransitioning. So these poor kids are being like shoved in this sort of really insane circle. And
I think it has to start. We have to start with like making sure that we understand that these children are feeling real feelings and that these children are feeling real feelings, not just because they have personally screwed up in any way, but because society has done them wrong. We start with that these children are doing bad because we're doing something wrong. And then we work from there to help these children. I think any discussion about there's been a lot of news about pediatric transition in the United States. Europe is really getting ahead with turning around. Starting to get back to gatekeeping and starting to get back to realistic assessment of people's mental health, starting to get back to some realistic discussions that we were all having before social media and Tumblr, ruined the world. The United States is a few years behind, it seems, but they're getting there. The amazing Dr. Julia Mason has worked so hard to push the American Academy of Pediatrics. Did I say that right? AAP. To make a change, and they've resisted left, right, and center. It's terrible what they've been doing, but you can see today that the beginnings of the tiptoeings of taking things seriously again, and we have
Yep.
to make sure that we help them build a new narrative.
That's
I
right.
think there will be reckonings to be had with some people, but there
Yep.
are children in peril right now, so we have to build a model for these young people in distress.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're such a great caring person, and that really what you're saying is so important. I think that's the
Thank you.
problem is it's not black and white. It's not a black and white issue.
Yeah.
None of this is. But I'm gonna just go back as an older transsexual and 100% believe it is social media, because we never had this amount of kids saying they were trans and also offering this as a solution when this isn't necessarily a solution. And what's going on with these kids that they need to adopt this identity so bad and be a part of. It's not just that they're identifying as trans, they want to take hormones and do really kind of insane things that are irreversible, right? We have,
Yeah.
a lot of detransitioners speaking out about they're 15 years old and they did stuff that they can never, ever come back from, ever. And
Yeah, it's
why is that
so sad.
happening? It saddens me. I'll be honest with you. It does. It worked out for me. It didn't work out for them.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, you
sad
were an
part.
adult and you went through that gauntlet. The tragedy is in this world that is not kind to gender nonconformity. The
Yes.
truth is,
Yes.
if you have to go through the gauntlet, if you want to face the gender nonconformity of the world by medicalizing your appearance, then you're
Mhm.
going to have to go through a gauntlet first to make sure that that's the right decision. That's
Brilliant.
just the way the calculus has to work. The only other
Brilliant.
way we can change the calculus to make that painful gauntlet not happen
Mhm.
is to make all of society not make people feel so distressed about their gender nonconformity in the
There you
first
go.
place. Does that
There
make
you
any
go.
sense?
100%, because when I was a butch woman, I felt uncomfortable in the world because you're looked at. Really, it's not easy to walk the world as a butch woman. I mean, there's a lot of levels there, and especially back in the day, right? I mean, I got physically beat up. I got so many
Yeah.
crazy things happen to me. But so the society was not making it comfortable for me to walk the world. Instead of us trying to figure out you're right, gender nonconformity. We've lost that. Now it's like you feel like a boy, whatever that means, right? Or you're dressing like a boy, or you want to play with a boy toy. You're all of a sudden
Yeah.
trans. So you're right. We're not addressing that. And going through the gauntlet is also a really, really important thing to say. I lived a life before I chose to take this, particular. How can a kid make that choice? And why are we making the kid feel that they have to make that choice?
Yeah. Why aren't we dismantling the gauntlet? Yeah, like
It's
that's what we should
brilliant.
be doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it's never going to go away. The truth is,
Yeah.
sex and gender are complicated. And
That's
the truth
true.
is, gender is a lot more complicated than both sides will
Yeah,
admit.
I agree.
I
Yep.
come from this quote unquote gender critical side. I
Mhm.
don't really entirely like that term gender critical because I think it
Mhm.
oversimplifies the complexity of how human beings in society interact with gender and gender expression. And I
Okay.
don't think it's ever going to entirely go away. I think
Yeah.
gender expression is a reflection of the fact that humans are animals that are dimorphic
Mhm.
and that males express themselves in a certain way and
Mhm.
females express themselves in a certain way. And in this kind of like, imagine we're apes because we are apes. But
Sure.
imagine
Yeah.
you're a different species. You're
Yeah.
aliens looking at humans from like an anthropological lens.
Yeah.
Gender and gender expression is a huge part of the human condition.
Mhm.
And sometimes transgender, so to speak, like males adopting very feminine expression is absolutely going to be natural, and it's going to be the best way for people to move forward. And sometimes the same with females expressing male gender expression. And also, if they're adults and they want to facilitate that with the technology that we have available to us,
That's
with,
right.
with modern medicine and modern science, that can all be okay. But once we go to that medical part, we have to make sure we're adults and we're recognizing the pros and cons.
That's
And
right.
at all times, we have to make sure that all of the beautiful, wonderful gender expression of the human experience is not sex change. We're not literally changing sex. Biological sex is not the same thing as gender expression. And there's always going to be a tension there, especially around sexuality.
Sure.
Humans,
Sure.
I'm a gay male. It's strictly sex based. It's not gender expression based.
That's
And I
right.
can't cross that line. From a distance, I can find a lot of trans men very, very handsome.
Sure.
But I'm not gonna,
Cross
I'm not
that
gonna cross
line.
the line. I'm just not. That's my personal boundary. It has a very deep
But it's deeply
meaning to me.
rooted. But honestly, I don't find that insulting or weird at all. I would never expect somebody to date or have sex with me because, you know, I identify as a gay man because it's my identity. It's not actually my biology, which is female. And so, you know, as you know, I was in the adult entertainment world and I did sort of cross that line there on some level, but that was within a structure, right? It was totally within a structure of fantasy, if you want to call it that. And it never,
I get that.
it never crossed over.
Yeah. I was a bartender for years at a gay bar. So, you know.
They showed my films.
Also, all the bartenders are working in porn. These are Adonis men.
That's right. Totally.
And in Canada, you know, Montreal is like the world capital of porn, I think. And it's not far from here.
Is.
So, you know,
it is.
I have friends who are going to Vegas every year to go to the gay porn.
Awesome.
You know,
but you know, that's its own enclosed world. And so for anyone to expect somebody else, because I believe it's innately in your body, my friend, that's who you're attracted to. You can't change it. There's no playing around with that. But this new idea that you need to like me because I now present as a man is absurd. And it's why we're having this with the gay and the trans space now, because you can't force somebody.
No, you can't. And I really want to address that. So I've been doing a lot of research. I've been interviewing and talking to a lot of sexologists and scientists and trying to get to the, like, can we really make the world pansexual? Can we socialize everyone to not have quote unquote gender preferences or gender whatever?
Nope.
Like that's what's like this is what sort of the gender identity ideology believes, that if you raise children from early enough, that biological sex is always superseded by gender, then everyone's going to be pangender, so to speak. And everyone's going to be pansexual, rather. That you will always be able to find the sexual partners you desire based on your declaring what your gender is, rather than what your biological sex is, which you can't change. So I've been looking into the real hard science, like, can that happen? If you're a heterosexual female who becomes a trans man, can you become a gay man? Can you become a trans gay man? And will you ever, in a utopian future, integrate into, like, be just like any other gay man, but happen to have a vagina or maybe a neopenis or whatever they call it? The answer is a hard no. There is a little bit of flexibility there. The truth is, if you make significant changes to your secondary sex characteristics, there's a little bit of, you know, you're going to get a little bit more. There are more people who are willing to have sex with you. You know,
that's true.
You know,
that's
but
true.
It's never going to be 100%. Like trans women, their sex partners know that they're male, and that is a factor. And that's been a factor for all time. I think a lot of transsexuals don't realize that, or don't want to face that, or the young ones coming up don't. That if you become a trans woman, you're not just going to be like every other woman. You're going to be a trans woman, and your dating market is not going to be like every other woman. It's going to be a trans woman. That's a hard truth. But the science is crystal clear. There are parts of the brain that are very, very, very specific to biological sex. So if you get into trans womanness because you think you can just be like every other woman on the block, you're going to face a hard reality when you realize that the sex market doesn't work that way. Even if you pass very well, a lot of people, it's not going to work. That's a very difficult topic to have around in this new environment. You know,
it is.
I know I'm being really, really spicy right now.
No, you're being awesome. You know, this is what people need to know. I transitioned. I've always liked women, right? But when I did transition, something kind of clicked inside of me, and I wanted to try men, right? And so, but I would say my innate sexual attraction is most definitely women. I can sexually have a sex with a guy and have a good time, but it's not something I actually seek out, right? And that being said, I cannot expect a gay man when they like me, and all of a sudden I'm always honest, like, hey, dude, you know, I'm X, Y, and Z. They're like, okay, I'm not really interested. I get it. I totally get it. Why would I be upset about that? Like, it's like, to me. So now we have this that we were talking about earlier. These new, mostly as trans identified males, right? Trans women expecting everyone else's sexuality to change in order for them to feel wanted or needed. That's why what you're saying is so important. What you're saying is facts.
I wanted to address it not with ideology by saying that's offensive or I don't feel like it. I wanted to look at, like, is it literally biologically possible?
It is.
Has it ever happened in anthropological history, in human history? It has not.
Nope.
Is it maybe possible? What are we seeing? And we
That's
are
right.
seeing a lot of things. We're seeing a major uptick in porn consumption with the word
That's right.
trans.
That's right.
So there's something going on there. There's a
Yep,
lot
that's
more
right.
straight men.
I agree.
They're exposing themselves to a lot more sex through,
Yep.
they're masturbating to more and more extreme porn, and they're starting to find maybe a new spice that will keep me going is trans. So there's a lot of looking into that. So there's a little bit of movement there. The honest truth is I'm looking into this, and yes, there are more heterosexual males who are going to have sex with trans women than there used to be, but that needle isn't moving nearly as much as people think. And the hard truth is that you can kind of, I think, I wanted to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
I was planning on contacting you to do some research about,
Great.
because you worked in the porn industry for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk to you about where I could find some stats about viewership and things like that.
Yeah, I can help you.
So maybe we can talk about that. But my understanding so far, my preliminary, it seems that like the actual amount of like the number of males who have sex with males and the number of males who have sex with females, and the number of females who have sex with females and the number of females who have sex with males, those numbers are actually pretty steady. People there's way more people identifying as bi and pan and queer as it used to be. But in the bedrooms, the number of actual same-sex encounters isn't changing,
That's right. And I know that from porn. People have to know this. Pornography is fantasy land. It's literally a fantasy. So it's a very large market, trans women porn, right? So and who their customer base is are straight men, and it's actually taking over gay male porn, which is pretty much the standard of porn. But trans women porn is huge now, and it's their customer base tends to be straight men. But that being said, we need to be honest here. It's because it's a fantasy. It is not something that they seek out. And that's why trans women are getting mad about it, because they're like, I'm not just a fantasy. I'm not just I'm like, but that's the reality. I was a fantasy in porn. Those gay men would never have a relationship with me. They would never. It was just a fantasy. And and when you come to things with reality in your head, then you're not going to get hurt, and you're not going to expect anything from anybody, right? But I think this expectation that when you transition, all these men are going to know, and you just said it right there. The stats show that. But it's fascinating to me because there are a lot of straight men who are sort of fantasy-wise interested in this situation. But I think there's levels of why that is.
I think there's levels too. I think we need to have another conversation just about the whole sexuality aspect.
That's right.
I think we should have a huge conversation about that. I agree. It'd be really, really interesting to get right into it. I would love it. By that. We have to admit that like gender and gender expression is a big part of transitioning, but especially it would seem from male to female trans, sexuality is a huge factor in this. Sexuality
it's more than guys like me. So 100% more, I think, for trans women. It feels like they're sexual, but I'm seeing more younger generation of trans, what do they call it? Trans masks now. They call it trans mask. So I see them identifying as gay men and then looking like girls still, not even looking like me, and then expecting gay men and getting all mad, and they're all on the internet. You're homophobic. I'm like, actually, you're homophobic. The gay men are not homophobic. They're being honest. You look like a girl and you are a girl, and I'm not interested in you.
Yeah, those girls clearly, these are the girls, there's a phase that almost all straight girls go through where they like gay romance because they don't have to think about their own bodies, right? Like, remember that movie Brokeback Mountain?
Of course.
That came out like almost 20 years ago?
Yep.
That movie, most movies go into the theaters, they have a big opening weekend, and then they last for 3 or 4 more weeks, and then they're out of the theaters. You're in LA, you know all about the movie industry.
That's right.
Well, Brokeback Mountain had legs. Brokeback Mountain stayed in the movie theaters for months and months and months, and the reason was that there were this cohort of teenage girls who were they would go every week obsessively to watch Brokeback Mountain over and over and over again, because it was these 2 super hunks,
That's right.
The hottest guys in Hollywood, Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. Oh my God, having a gay romance. They don't have to think about their girlish bodies and all the sexuality and that pressure, but they can look at these 2 super hunks going at it. This was like a girl fantasy, and you see this all the time, girls having gay fantasies.
That's right.
Because they're coming to terms with the very real difficulties of embracing the pressure of sexuality on their bodies.
That.
But now you're seeing these girls taking it the next step and being like, I can just stay in that phase forever, and I can be a trans gay man, And then all their fear of the society's pressure on girlhood and womanhood, they can say it's all homophobia. They can just externalize all of that, you know? It's a real tragedy. And again, I don't want to blame these girls, and I don't want to blame the trans movement entirely. There's misogyny in society. There's a lot of reasons why this is happening. We can deconstruct it without just laying blame on one group or another.
Thank you. I just love you that you're so, you know, you really have a lot. No, I'm not kidding. That's why I always was sort of attracted to you as online, because I see your compassion. I don't see you just going rah, like, you know, a lot of people do. You're really trying to figure out what's going on here. And that is important.
But it stresses me out because I also get angry and I do lash out. I'm an honest person and I have feelings. I get angry. If a male is cheating in women's sports, or if a trans woman is saying something mean about women, I am not going to, I'm not going to play politeness with their gender anymore. I will not. And that makes me feel so guilty and upset, because I know I have transsexual followers who unfollow me because they get upset that I'm misgendering someone.
That's because they're not listening.
That's the world I live in.
But they're not listening to you. And why can't you? No, but the thing is that they're not listening to you. I appreciate that as a transsexual, that you're honest about your feelings, because if you're not, then I don't really know who you are. And you know what I mean? Like, no, I'm not kidding. It's so important that honesty is on the table on so many levels. You might not agree with X, Y, and Z with me. And that doesn't mean you dislike me. It just means that's just your way of being. You know, I love being 60. I just love it, because I'm doing this now. Whatever. I don't really care if you call me a lady. I mean, you're on the internet calling me a woman. I'm like, I got to be the ugliest woman in the world. Let me tell you here. Like, what are you talking about? But, you know, but going back to that, I do think these honest conversations are what crack sort of this hard shell that we've created around, oh, you can't say anything about trans people. Oh, you're transphobic if you don't let trans women compete. No, go fuck yourself. Trans women are totally biological men. They cannot compete against women. I won't stand for it. I won't stand for it either, my friend. You know that. Nope. Not at all.
It's hard though talking about it. I wish I could just be more honest like this, but I don't know. My brain is wired to always get upset that I know that I'm pissing someone off on one side or the other. You know?
But I don't see that in you. I just see you being very straightforward, like Fred Sargent. You know Fred. Do you know Fred?
Oh yeah, I love Fred.
I love Fred. So you know, I did an interview with Fred too, but you know, he got attacked at the Vermont Gay Pride or whatever they call it now, and I'm like, what? There is no way in hell I'm going to be okay with that. That is an L.
How did that not get on the front page of the New York Times? I get so angry. The founder of Gay Pride got beaten up at a gay pride movement. That should be like, holy shit, stop the presses. Something's wrong here. The founder of Gay Pride cannot go to a gay pride parade without being violently, physically assaulted. And the papers didn't do anything.
Nothing.
That should have been a news cycle on CNN, 24 hours, ticker tape for weeks. Like, how the hell did society get here? And there was nothing. I'm so angry. I burn with rage at that.
Me too. Know? I burn. I get so pissed. I'm like, how? And none of the gay rags, none of them. I'm like, you people have lost your minds. You've lost your way. How dare you? This person made it possible not only for gay men, but for me to exist. Yeah. He did. And so it's just disgusting that our community has become so divided on so many levels. And he's homophobic.
He's angry at the word queer because he grew up in a time when everyone was dying. I remember when queer was the default word for me too, because I was of that sort of like, I grew up at the tail end of the AIDS crisis, so I didn't have to endure that firsthand. Though I certainly knew people who died of AIDS, because by the 90s, most people were getting treatment. There was a lot of education about condoms. So I can't say the AIDS crisis was my generation. I was the generation immediately after it. But I was still a homeless street kid for being gay. I was still being beaten up, you know, and raped and stuff for it. And I used queer as a punk rock fuck you. And now I absolutely don't like the word because it's being used by people who aren't gay.
I know.
Saying I'm gay, but I'm not gay. I'm queer. It's the opposite of that, you know?
I know. I'm having sex with a man, but I'm not really gay. Like, that's pretty much like, what? I know, it's so, oh my God, dude, it's so crazy. But yeah, no, I have that same mixed feeling about queer. People have taken that over, right? But you can't say tranny. You can say queer, but you can't say tranny. I'm like, wait a minute, people, you're also
like the most used word at the trans I worked at.
I know,
it's like
dude,
everywhere.
It's everywhere. I live in LA, dude. Don't even get me started. It's so gross. I'm like, if I have to see that flag one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. That flag is so sick.
So funny.
So I'm gonna have to end here. The attention span. Just kidding. But I do have to go because I have to go to the dentist and get my teeth.
Well, maybe we can wrap up by just saying I hope we can get things back to normal, and I hope we can have our communities being separate in some ways and united in others at the same time. You know, it's funny. I'm the founder of LGB Alliance Canada, which just focuses on same-sex attraction, but I'm also part of LGBT Courage Coalition.
Thank you.
So I believe in some ways we're united and others we're separate, and we can be in harmony. You know, and if I come to LA or if you come to Toronto, I hope we can get together and have.
My God, that's a no-brainer, dude. So that's happening. But so LGBT Alliance, which I support, by the way. So thank you for building. Of course, 100%. I'm all about that. And also the LGBT Coalition, right? Is it LGBTQ?
LGBT Courage Coalition, which you're in as well.
I'm in it. That's right. I am. No, I'm going to put all the links at the bottom. But these are all great things that we need to start talking about and putting out there for other people to sort of see that there are options for them and that we don't, there's no discrimination. We want everybody to get along with each other, but we have to start talking about facts and getting back to reality here.
Well, I'm hoping that being on your channel, I get to meet more transsexuals who are rational and interesting.
100% you will. And so we appreciate you. I'll just speak for them. We appreciate you because it's how we're going to, no, I'm not kidding. It's how we're going to move forward and get rid of the crazy nuts who are ruining it for all of us. So with that, hey, everybody, thanks so much for watching. And I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Arty because he's super awesome. And like, subscribe, do all that stuff for me. And then we'll keep moving up and getting these awesome people on. So I'll see you on the next one.